Something strange in the skies over the Earth, operating from the Southeast Pacific to the Middle East, and even here in the American homeland. The United States military has encountered unexplained aerial phenomenon that even its best fighters and air defense systems have failed to identify or bring down. Now the United States Congress, in a historically unprecedented move, is demanding answers from the Department of Defense. What exactly is in our skies? UFOs and military involvement is nothing new, with the American military swept right into controversy when an unidentified object crashed into a rancher's land in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947. The crashed item would without question turn out to be a specialized weather balloon, but perhaps fearing the leaking of information on a very sensitive and top-secret program to monitor Soviet nuclear tests, Public Information Officer Walter Haut made the blunder of the century when he dictated a press release that the Army had discovered a crashed flying disc. This massive blunder would go on to entangle the U.S. military with UFOs for decades to come, and ardent believers to this day still hold on to the belief that there really was an alien disc at Roswell, despite the rancher who had discovered the item reporting that he discovered wreckage made of, quote, rubber strips, tinfoil, paper, and sticks. He'd only start thinking about UFOs when he heard one of the many popular flying disc stories at the time. Other details, including bodies and material with magical properties, would all end up being reported secondhand. Nonetheless, while Roswell may have been a top-secret weather balloon, Americans were definitely seeing strange things in the sky. In 1952, a series of highly publicized UFO incidents over Washington, D.C. led to growing national paranoia, fueled by the highly misleading facts propagated by national newspaper chains. With fear over UFOs reaching a fever pitch, the U.S. government consolidated several investigations into one single program codenamed Project Blue Book. This investigation would run until December 17, 1969, when the program was canceled after not discovering any credible threat to the United States of America. While Project Blue Book found that people were terrible eyewitnesses and that nearly all sightings could be explained by misidentification or natural phenomenon, the final report did admit that a small percentage of sightings were both impossible to explain and had credible witnesses. Despite this and the growing sightings of UFOs in sensitive military sites, such as nuclear weapons storage depots and ICBM fields, the official investigation was over. Then in 2020, because seriously, when else would this have happened, the doors on the UFO phenomenon were blown open once more by the shocking admission of the United States military that its fighter aircraft had indeed tracked unidentified aerial phenomena. In a massive blow to the conspiracy theorists who claim the U.S. government actively hides evidence of UFOs, the Department of Defense declassified 3 different videos of UFOs being investigated by American fighters. This was followed by the announcement that the Navy was installing formal guidelines for its pilots to report encounters with UFOs. All the press attention also revealed the existence of a then classified program run by the Department of Defense between 2007 and 2012 meant to study unidentified aerial phenomenon. The head of this classified program would himself go on to say the following about his findings. These aircraft, we'll call them aircraft, are displaying characteristics that are not currently within the U.S. inventory, nor in any foreign inventory that we are aware of. Once more adding fuel to the UFO fire was the revelation that in 2019, U.S. senators received a classified briefing on UFOs by Navy leadership, with the spokesman for the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations stating, Navy officials did indeed meet with interested congressional members and staffers to provide a classified brief on efforts to understand and identify these threats to the safety and security of our aviators, painting the UFO phenomenon as a concern to the safety of pilots. The statement may have inadvertently admitted that something was in fact being encountered by American military and civilian pilots, even if it necessarily isn't of alien origin. Given that the U.S. recently confirmed it had already flown a prototype 6th-generation fighter aircraft, we can only imagine that part of the reason so many of these UFO investigations have remained classified is because of the need to maintain secrecy around extremely sensitive weapon systems being tested by the U.S. military, some of which have likely been spotted by civilians who no doubt thought they were looking at alien aircraft, similar to the way that the flight tests of the B-2 bomber and F-117 during the 80s led to an avalanche of UFO reports. Yet it seems that the American Congress is not satisfied with the answers it's received so far, and now it's official. The American military has 180 days from the start of 2021 to give a detailed and complete disclosure on the UFO phenomenon. For conspiracy theorists everywhere, it's time to rejoice, as the congressional mandate dictates that the report must be unclassified and thus available to the public. The report instructs various intelligence agencies and the military to analyze in detail UFO data and intelligence gathered by the Office of Naval Intelligence and now defunct Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force and the FBI. UFO reports are actually nothing new, with curious congressmen and women occasionally tucking in provisions for mandatory briefs on the phenomenon into funding bills. Yet this report is different, as it's the most comprehensive gathering of interagency data on UFOs since Project Blue Book. It also formally establishes an interagency process to both gather and analyze future unidentified aerial phenomenon and report on these findings to the federal government. The report also mandates that any potential threats to national security posed by UFOs should be identified and calls on the American intelligence community to assess whether any potential foreign adversary, such as China or Russia, are behind the UFO phenomenon. Before you get your hopes too high though, while the report's mandated to be unclassified and thus accessible to the public, Congress approved the inclusion of a classified annex. This doesn't necessarily mean that any specific information on UFOs is being kept secret, but rather is a necessary measure for such a comprehensive report to be possible in the first place. Such a detailed report on UFOs is going to include highly classified details, such as intelligence sources in foreign governments and the testing and capabilities of next-generation weapon systems, which may have led to UFO sightings themselves. It will no doubt also include highly classified details of America's most sophisticated tracking systems, all information the U.S. would not want its adversaries to get their hands on. This report certainly comes at an auspicious time, with in late 2020 the former head of the Israeli space program publicly announcing that the U.S. and Israeli governments were in cooperation with extraterrestrials. The statement coming from such a highly placed government official and credible witness was sadly largely lost on a public completely focused on COVID-19 and an explosive presidential election. For believers in our visitation by aliens from outer space though, these two almost back-to-back developments signal at a greater plan to slowly indoctrinate the public to the reality that UFOs are real and aliens have been visiting us for decades. We just have to be prepared for the formal announcement by the slow disclosure of evidence to their existence. If that's true, then there's gonna come a pretty big blow to the poor nerds who've been wasting their time poring over boring computer data over at Breakthrough Listen, the multi-million-dollar privately funded program that's focused on eavesdropping on the electronic